Noting the chills he's getting just standing before it, Thomas Andre advises him to run away or else he'll die. However, the German declares that he's well aware, but he can't let go of his pride as a hunter. Charging himself up, he thinks that he holds no regrets and that he would make the same choice many times over, to die proudly rather than live a meaningless life. He keeps repeating that he made the right choice as the beast monarch smiles chillingly. He gets terrified as the monarch lunges at him and admits he made the wrong choice. Suddenly, Kaisel bursts onto the scene, clamping his jaws onto the monarch and flying away with him, leaving Leonard astonished. However, the monarch grapples with Kaisel's teeth and rips his frickin' jaw off, destroying the shadow. Staring through the dust, the shadow monarch emerges with his heel up and axe kicks the beast, smashing him into the ground. Jin then falls next to Lennart and asks him to take Thomas to a safe place. Recovering from the rubble, the beast monarch states that he can smell the shadow monarch from Jin, calling him human. As they make it to a safe distance, Lennart yells for Jin not to worry about them. But Jin stays focused, noting the beast's killing intent and realizing that on top of that, he isn't the only one present. The beast monarch asks how he wields so much of a superior being's power in a human body. Another voice interrupts, suggesting the administrator found a way, since it's been long since their deal with the shadow monarch. Emerging from the ground, a voice muses that she could consume the human's body and adds that she's always wondered what another monarch would taste like. Keeping his focus, system notifications appear introducing the king of the snowfolk, the frost monarch, the king of the beasts, the beast monarch, and the king of the insects, the plague monarch. All recognize Jin as an enemy. Surrounded by the monarchs, a beam of aura reaching the heavens appears, and Jin commands, "Come forth." In an instant, his shadow expands as soldiers enter the fight. Igris and Iron get the Frost Monarch, while Jima and Tank get the Beast, and Greed and Baru get the Plague. The Beast Monarch asks if this is the new Shadow Army. The Blue Grandpa inhales sharply before blasting a massive wave of ice. Jin blocks it, but his soldiers end up trapped. The Frost Monarch comments on their number, but says that his soldiers are small fries and won't be able to move in this prison. Pointing to Baru, the Plague Monarch advises that he should have left her children alone, as she hadn't seen them in a while. While ridiculing him for his strategies, the Frost Monarch implies that what Jin did is essentially belittling the other monarchs, and adds that he didn't think the Shadow Monarch was able to fully absorb the power of the Shadow Monarch, claiming that even though the Shadow Monarch was the strongest monarch, they must not look down on the other monarch's strength. Shattering the ice covering his hand, Jin looks at the Frost Monarch saying, "You," flipping the blade around and pointing it. He says that he will The Frost Monarch prepares ice golems, and the Plague Monarch asks if she can join in the fun too, while she creates an army of undead. As the zombified insectoids lunge at Jin, he slashes them away, accusing the Plague Monarch of using the hunter's corpses. Looking up, he notices an ice golem's foot about to land on him, but evades it, blitzing up its body and slashing the top of its head clean off. Landing like a badass while more golems attack, he dials in and blasts through them directly into the Frost Monarch. As they trade gazes, the Beast Monarch appears out of nowhere, attacking him with his claws. As they end up blitzing around, the Beast Monarch ridicules him for thinking that a mere piece of metal can damage him, but the Dripmaster cuts his fucking hand off, agreeing that it couldn't have if it was any other piece of metal. Suddenly, Jin notices a large hand dropping from the sky and evades just in time. With 5 hands, the Monarch of the Plague flies high before him as the Beast Monarch recovers his injured hand. Taking a breather, the 3 monarchs regroup before Jin. Cracking an iceberg, a shadow hand erupts, causing Jin to look over as Baru bursts from the ice, screeching for his liege, and how that insect woman dares lay hands on him. The Frost Monarch is surprised at how a mere shadow soldier broke the binding spell, and how a commander-level entity could be in the hands of a human, while the Beast Monarch comments on how a commander-level shadow soldier is practically a god of destruction. Sending a hand, the Plague says that a child who doesn't recognize their mother needs to be punished. The hand closes in, but Baru back slashes it in half while calling her a king. crazy bitch, which vexes the Lady Monarch. Landing in front of Jin, Baru admires how he isn't being pushed back even when fighting against a superior species and never fails to amaze him with his limitless strength. The insectoids use this chance to launch an attack, but the duo manage to slash them away. As they are distracted, the Plague Monarch launches her hands, tearing through Baru and smashing Jin into the ground. As Jin tries to recover, ice needles cover the sky, impacting Jin all at the same time, but he deflects them all. Glaring at the Frost Monarch, Ice Grandpa asks him how long he can hold out against their pincer attack when suddenly one of Baruka's daggers pierces his heart. The Drip Monarch reminds him that he won't be getting out alive. The Frost Monarch questions how a human like Jin dares say such a thing to a monarch such as himself, while he notes that although he was hit in the heart, it doesn't look like it will be fatal for them. Jin jumps at the Frost Monarch and uses Dagger Rush, but the Frost Monarch just smirks as the Beast Monarch appears, sticking his arm out and summoning a massive blade, slashing Jin in the back, causing him to cough blood and terrify Baru. However, the Plague Monarch appears behind him, introducing herself as Queresha, the monarch of plagues and the mother of every insect in existence. She grapples her hands around Baru as he struggles, and states that although he is ungrateful, she'll still embrace him as one of her children. At the same time, the Beast Monarch stands before Jin, revealing that this is his end. In desperation, Baru screams for the servants to assist the Shadow Monarch. Frozen in the ice, Greed says that he will be the one, and bursts out of the ice, finishing cutting that last breath of the enemies. Noticing him, the werewolf states that he must have been a stronger warrior in his lifetime. The Frost Monarch adds that the higher-ranking Shadow Soldiers have started to appear as Iron, Igris, and Tusk burst from the prison. The Frost Monarch approaches Jin and tells him that his wound is fatal and that playtime is long over. But Dripwu stands back on his feet, asking if he's talking about this cut, and uses status effect recovery. This people watch from New York, London, Shanghai, and Paris. While back in Korea, Leonard describes it as if a storm is raging around Jinwoo. Thomas Andre asks what's happening, and the German tells him that it feels like he's witnessing the end of the world. Spectating from afar, a hunter questions if he's really the Jinwoo he knows, as it's revealed. Baek knew he was a hunter who could grow, but wonders just how much stronger he got in such a short time. Meanwhile, Igris and Iron fight the beast, while the Frost Monarch holds off Greed and Tusk and Baru's slices of Queresha's fingers. Enraged, she attacks. However, Jinwoo appears behind her and tells her about the Creator's prophecy and how he has been told that he will die from the pillar of flames that holds up the world, but that he wasn't told if the pillar will fall or not. Jin then slices the monarch's giant head in half. Elsewhere, standing on a roof, Lim Tae-gyu reflects on his position and doesn't think this is a fight he can interfere in. For 30 minutes, the elite assassins of the Scavenger Guild were dispatched all over the area, and when they receive the signal, will pour their support fire towards the enemy in hopes of inflicting lethal damage to the enemy. He questions how many of them will survive if they do this. Tae-gyu knows they would die if they failed at sniping, and they'd still die even if they succeeded, as their opponent is a monster not even Thomas Andre could subdue. Suddenly, a hand grabs his shoulder, and a mysterious man tells him to just sit back and watch. Terrified, he jumps back and aims in the man's direction as his gaze widens. At the same time, hunters are gathering for magical beast subjugation and evacuation, but not one is able to interfere with the fight, only simply waiting for everything to be situated. All they could do is watch as the end of the battle was seemingly nearing. Preparing an attack, she spreads a liquid all over Jin, which he realizes is poison. He mocks the monarch as detoxification is successful. Enraged by his taunts, Queresha charges at him, ready to rip him apart, but Jinwoo stops her in midair using ruler's authority. Overwhelmed and unable to move, Jin jumps before her and uses skill mutilation to turn her into mincemeat. Realizing this is death, she says that it's a heavy darkness that humbles even the monarchs who were created from darkness. Acknowledging how brilliant is, she fucking blows up as a notification pops up telling Jin he's defeated Queresha, the monarch of plague and one of the 9 monarchs, increasing his level thrice. This stunned by the death of Queresha, the Frost Monarch sees Jinwoo tapping into the Shadow Monarch's power and fears facing that might again. However, the Beast Monarch reassures him not to be afraid, saying he's exhausted. The Beast Monarch tells him not to worry as he chokes Beru, saying Jinwoo's fatigue and reliance on small fries proves he's still incomplete and not a real threat to true monarchs. As he tightens his grip around Baru, Jin realizes Baru is fading and questions if the same happened to his shadow soldier on Thomas Andre. He tries to cancel summon Baru but is shocked when he's notified that he can't. The beast looks over before jumping out of the way as Jin attempts to slash him. Jin manages to save Baru, however. Ice Grandpa agrees with the Beast King as he summons ice spikes around them. He tells the human that his confidence is misplaced in his powers, which are ownerless. Wielding a trident, he plans to sever the strings to Jinwoo's control over his shadows, trapping them in his ice and making them go through resurrection to eat at Jin's mana pool. Asking what he'll do and stabbing at him, Jin attempts to block the power strike, but the trident pierces his shoulder. Raising the shaft, he flings Jinwoo up and over his shoulder, slamming him into the ground. But he notices Jin isn't there, when suddenly he reappears slashing at Frosty, who dodges and retaliates with a hit in his stomach, causing Jin to spit blood as he's sent flying. Jin still lands on his feet and comments on the Monarch's speed. The Frost Monarch notes Jinwoo's stealth skill must consume heavy mana and vows to end this quickly. Jin watches as he dashes forward and the two blitz attacks. Movement, sight, breathing, mana flow, he can see them. If only he could be faster than him. The Monarch says that he doesn't know what Jin is planning, but it's no use, as he summons a scythe. Dual-wielded, he slashes an icy attack. But Jin slips behind him, preparing a blow. However, the Monarch just smirks as something comes over Jinwoo. The Hunters Guild and Leonard are shocked as it's revealed the Beast Monarch pierced Jin with his claws. The Blue Grandpa froze Jin's feet in place as the Beast's claws are shown clearly through Jin's chest. The Beast Monarch mocks him, saying Jinwoo is nothing without the speed he's so confident in. The arc continues. Status report, status report. Dropping his daggers to the ground, Jin's hands hover over the bloody claws as he states that his level increase makes this much nothing. However, the Frost Monarch stabs Jin, returning his weapon and asking if he's able to heal like he did earlier, though he doubts it as Jin isn't a complete monarch despite his strength and asks if this is his limit, informing him that he won't be able to witness their armies invade, bringing mountains of human corpses and rivers of blood. He says that this country will be different and vows to freeze every single human in Jin's country, sentencing its people to eternal agony, adding that they will have to live through an eternity, not being able to die nor live. As he begins freezing Jinwoo, he demands to see contempt in his eyes before he dies, but still, a little more, just a little more, he thinks. Player HP has reached 0. Player has died. Player is in possession of the Black Heart. Player has met all the requirements for passive skill, unknown. The skill board appears and the passive skill, unknown, has been activated. Activating the skill, light gradually returns before overwhelming all. Jinwoo opens his eyes before sitting up and clutching his chest, breathing heavily, recalling his last moments with the Monarchs. He wonders if it was all a dream before looking around and realizing he's in a hospital. Certain that the ice dagger pierced through his heart, he questions how he's still alive. Suddenly, Jin Chul walks in the room. Jin looks calling him by Chairman Wu Jin Chul and asks what happened to the Monarchs. No, monsters. And how is he still alive? Initially stunned, Jin Chul says that there are things he should tell him. Firstly, he's not the chairman, but the chief inspector of surveillance. Secondly, he'd like to ask about the moving statues. And thirdly, how does Jin Wu know who he is? This surprises Jin as he asks what he means by moving statues. Jin Chul responds that when they arrived on site with the White Tiger Guild after receiving the report, it was all ready, but Jin interrupts, saying that's not what he was asking. Grasping his face, Jin realizes that this hospital looked familiar because he spent 2 weeks here in the past. Jin Chul acknowledges Jin's difference in appearance as Jin recollects that the VIP patient room was the room he woke up in after he barely survived the double dungeon. Jin Chul asks if he's all right, to which Jin responds that he needs some time to rearrange his thoughts. Questioning how this is happening, Jin checks his stats, which are all the same as before, along with everything that was in his inventory. Suddenly, a voice asks what her brother is doing right after waking up as Jinna stands at the door questioning if he hurt his head too, but frantically looking around and wondering if she got the wrong room. Jin remembers that back then he gradually changed into his current look and asks if she really can't recognize her older brother. Sizing him up and questioning if he's really her older brother, Jin tells Jinna that it's probably just a feeling. Walking out, Jin says that he's a little busy and needs to head to the Hunter Association to tell them that he's giving up being a hunter. Turning his head, he acknowledges that Jinna came over while in the middle of class and insists she heads back to school, adding, "You too, Han Song-yi," telling her not to even think about giving up her studies to become a hunter. This shocks her as she questions how Jin knows her name as he walks out forming a plan to rebuild his shadow army. But how could this be happening? And why did such a thing happen? He's really come back in time. In the rank assessment room, the agents know it's been 2 years since Cha Hai-in, and now to think that a homeless-looking guy would be an S-rank hunter. They try to explain to Jin that the device cannot measure his power, but Jin interrupts that he knows, and before doing it again, he would like to meet with the chairman, offering to guide him to the room. Jin already walks off, saying he already knows where it is, and will go himself. In an elevator, Kang Tae-shik wonders what kind of scenario he should make up today. Knowing it's not his first time making up lies to the association, he acknowledges that if he gets caught by Chief Inspector Woo Jin-chul, he'd be in big trouble. Jin speaks up, saying that he possesses a stealth skill and yet hasn't reported it to the association. Kang questions how he knows, but Jin interrupts that even though he's a high-ranking hunter, he isn't on the list of names that are strictly managed by the association. Reaching for his blades, Jin Woo reveals them, telling Kang that someone will ask him to avenge their daughter for them, and that he's not interested in what he does with the criminals. However, if he hurts innocent hunters during the incident, he will die by Jin's hands. He notices that his daggers are gone, as Jin informs him of his only warning. Kang nervously asks who he is as Jin walks away, and questions who that ghost-like guy is again. Peering around the corner and greeting the chairman, he says that since he looked for him as soon as he got his test results, he assumes Jin is already somewhat familiar with the procedures already. He asks Jin, who dismisses it, what's the matter, as a notification to restart the world is revealed. Gun-hee states he'll get to the point, but before that, Jin interjects saying he's got a deal he wants to talk about first. Thinking that he needs to go to Jeju Island and build up his shadow army, he asks the chairman to change the regulation so that summoned creatures can be counted as raid members by the association, and if he does, he will then kill all of the ants on Jeju Island himself. Alarmed by such a statement, Gun-hee asks if he's not aware of how many times they've failed raids on Jeju Island already. However, as he realizes that this energy is power that far exceeds any national-level hunter, Jin explains that it's something only he can accomplish and asks for it to be left to him, assuring the chairman that he can take care of all the ants on Jeju Island. The chairman questions just what on earth this is as time skips, and Jin goes back through the dungeons and Lizard's Arc, the Prisoner's Arc, Red Gate Arc, Hunter's Guild Gate Arc, the waking of his mother from the eternal slumber, Jeju Raid Arc, and the recruiting of Baru. Standing there and sighing, he asks, "Why don't you stop this?" before yelling out that he knows this is all an illusion and demands he stops the charade and reveal himself. Looking on, he's suddenly warped to darkness as dozens of system notifications pop up. Leering over and questioning who he is, Jin asks if he is the King of the Dead. Walking forth, the King of the Dead tells Jin that if he wanted to, he could live in this world for eternity, adding that it'd be like never waking from the most wonderful dream. Jin asks if he's telling him to remain trapped within this illusion he's created, but the King of the Dead denies creating this world and says Jin is responsible for its creation. He explains that it's a world created by combining Jin's desire to correct his mistakes up to this point together with the monarch's power. In other words, this is his territory. This is the eternal rest. In other words, death. He tells Jin that he's been watching him for far longer than he could possibly imagine. He, who had always been closer to death than anyone, yet so desperately resisting against it. He is the record of Jin Woo's struggles, the evidence of his resistance and the reward of his sufferings. He is death. He is eternal rest, as well as terror. He is Sung Jin Woo. Within the sovereign's territory, Jin can do anything he wants, he says, while growing a tree from his palm. Jin can turn the monarch's servants into his own and absorb his power from them. The monarch says that although it's only possible within his own territory, the power to create, destroy, and change the world is an omnipotent power. Jin asks if he's saying that they both possess the same power, and the king responds that he's been waiting for the day they finally meet for a long time now. introducing himself as the Shadow Monarch, the king of the dead who rules over the power of death, and the administrator of the deepest part of the darkness. Jin asks why he was chosen, and the Shadow Monarch says that he shall show him their beginning and end, and also Jin Woo's beginning. Meanwhile, the Beast Monarch confirms Jin's death as Thomas Andre realizes that Hunter Sung's presence just disappeared and questions what happened. Beck calls it impossible now, knowing that there isn't anyone who can stop those magical beasts. Taegyu thinks that he shouldn't have listened to that person earlier, and maybe they could stop them if they bombarded them right now. No, they must stop them. Now that even the national level hunters have failed to subdue them, there is no going back. Roaring for everyone to fire on his signal at the magical beast that looks like a white walker, the monarch whips around, stopping Taegyu in his tracks, moments before Jin's body begins emitting shadowy aura. As it's revealed, his purple heart is now beating. This shocks the two monarchs, who jump for the body knowing that they must stop the true king from descending now after Jin's death. However, the beast gets booted in the fucking face, causing him to fly into the Frost Monarch, sending them both crashing into a building. Sung Il-hwan slides in front of his son's body, declaring that from here on, none shall touch this child. In another world, light and darkness existed in an age where everything else has yet to exist. The Absolute Being split light and created the emissaries of God, and split darkness to create the 8 sovereigns. The sovereigns who were born to destroy the world, and the emissaries who were born to maintain the world, continuously killed each other's soldiers. Fatigued by the constant and unending war, the brightest fragment of the brilliant light asked the Absolute Being why thee does not aid the most faithful subjects fighting in their honor. He questioned why thee ignores the screams of the countless soldiers dying for thy honor, and begs for him to lend them his strength to extinguish their opponents. But the Absolute Being did not reply back to the fragment. At that moment, the fragments of brilliant light realized that to the Absolute Being, the battle between themselves and the sovereigns is nothing more than a form of entertainment, and the ruler does not wish for the war to end. Everyone worshipped the Absolute Being. Everyone let out outcries of war for the Absolute Being. Everyone pledged their allegiance with their blood and lives to the Absolute Being. They have been abiding by the law until now, but there were overwhelmingly more of those who fell victim to death than those who overcame it. Even if they abided by the law, only death awaits them. The Shadow Monarch says that as long as the Absolute Being exists, the war will never end, and to end this meaningless war, they unsheathed their blades. It was the start of the rebellion, and that is the Shadow Monarch of the distant past. He was the sole emissary of God who stood up against the rebellion of the other emissaries, but his pitiful number of soldiers powerlessly fell before the united armies of the emissaries. On his knees before his dead army, he thought it was the end. However, when he reopened his eyes within the darkness, the greatest fragment of brilliant light realized that the Absolute Being had hidden a certain power inside him. "Arise," he said. Darkness covered his wings as he used his new power to unlodge all of the spears, while his newfound shadow army arose. He led his new army to the battlefront. However, when he returned, everything was already over. The Absolute Being was dead. The remaining fragments of brilliant light had killed the Absolute Being and called themselves the New Gods, thus assuming the position of the rulers, and used various tools containing the power of the Absolute Being to hunt down the sovereigns. As a result, the King of Giants, Legia, was captured by the rulers, and the power balance between the two sides collapsed. Then the sovereigns realized the severity of the situation, and the Shadow Monarch used that moment to reach out to the sovereigns, knowing that they had no choice but to combine forces with him in order to combat their common enemy, the rulers. From then on, he continued the long-lasting battle as neither a fragment of brilliant light nor an emissary of God, but as the Shadow Monarch. Time was on his side. The corpses and the souls that remained on the battlefield joined his army, and when he combined forces with the army of destruction, led by the king of berserk dragons, the monarchs as well as the rulers came to fear him. Two of the monarchs who feared the Shadow Monarch aimed for his back after combining forces, and due to that, his shadow army was nearly extinguished. Strength that was too powerful had brought him betrayal, While the king of the beasts, Beast Monarch, ran away after abandoning his soldiers, the king of the demons, Monarch of White Flames, Baran, had to pay the ultimate price. But at that moment the silver soldiers came through their gates in the sky. The monarch raised his cape before shielding it around Baran and absorbing him as the rulers made landfall. Setting foot around the monarch, they all took a knee around the king of the dead. They each pleaded for his forgiveness, saying there is no reason for them to fight any longer, even though they possessed enough power to send him back to nothingness if they wanted to. They chose to pursue peace. It was the least respect they could have shown him. For the time, he was their ally, fighting on the front lines while leading the army of brilliant light. The monarch questions their pleas, asking if it wasn't them who harmed their lord with swords and spears. A ruler says he was their master as well, which angered the monarch, who grabbed him by the face and said that that is precisely why their crimes are even more heinous. The ruler says that he should understand better than anyone how they felt when they raised their banners of rebellion against their master. They simply wanted to end the war, he says. The Shadow Monarch tells them to pierce his heart with their spears, as this is the end they so desperately seek. Begging for him to find forgiveness, the monarch demands they kill him. All bringing their fists to their chest and bowing, the rulers ask the greatest fragment of brilliant light to please quell his anger. He tells Jin that he was overwhelmed and couldn't find any kind of solution, so he decided to hide himself for the sake of revenge. Since he had trapped the Monarch of White Flames within him, he was planning on striking the forces of the Beast Monarch after letting his body recover. But while he was hiding, the monarchs who lost the majority of their power had been defeated by the rulers. And when he reappeared in front of the monarchs, the Shadow Monarch explains that they searched for a new world for the sake of building up their new army. Jin questions if it was the Earth, and the monarch confirms, saying that to the humans, the appearance of the monarchs must have seemed very unprecedented, and their annihilation was inevitable. Realizing he's seen this scenery before and guessing the demon castle, he asks if this is what will happen in the future, but the monarch says that this is actually record of the past. Jin asks what he means, and he's told that if the monarch's reason of existence is destruction, then the reason for the existence of the rulers was to maintain this world, where the absolute being was no longer. The rulers were late to detect the movements of the sovereigns and sent their armies, and everything had come to an end. Naturally, the rulers grew angry at the fact that the army of the chaos world they failed to eradicate managed to wring destruction upon another world. So in order to correct this, they used their tool containing the power of the absolute being, which they had prohibited themselves from using, the tool of God, the cup of reincarnation. It was an incredible tool that could turn back time by 10 years. The rulers used everything they had in order to save this world, but the current Earth was much too weak to fight against the monarchs. And Earth, where no magical energy resided, could not endure the mass-scale battles. Whether the monarch or the rulers won the battle, the impact brought upon this planet would remain the same. Thus, the rulers made a very difficult decision. If they can't save everyone, they wanted to make sure that at least some would survive so those people could continue on in this world. Jin realizes this is how the hunters were created, and the monarch continues saying that they were making human beings capable of surviving the collision between the two forces. The rulers wanted the humans to survive no matter what they had to do. Jin Woo thinks that for those who could survive in the changed world, if they were to realize that with the exception of the small number of people who are hunters, everyone must die, could society really operate normally? The Demon King is a fragment of memories left behind by the Shadow Monarch. Jin infers that this world has already gone through countless annihilations, and the monarch confirms. However, the higher beings are not able to go against the flow of time. They are able to perceive the change in the flow of time created by the cup of reincarnation. While the rulers tried to fix their mistakes several times, the sovereigns also began modifying their plan continuously, until the tool of God couldn't be used anymore. This makes Jin inquire about how many times the cup of reincarnation can be used, and the monarch says that there is no such thing as infinite power, just like how the absolute being, who was capable of creating worlds, was eliminated by his own creations. Jin asks how creations were able to kill their creator, and the king responds responds that it's no different from humans dying from machines they've built. The fragments of light were created to fight, and their powers were more than enough to bring down their creator. Then the sovereigns utilized the rulers' methods to create a plan of their own, similar to how rulers lent power to humans so they can kill magical beasts, thus strengthening the world. Sovereigns also borrowed humans' bodies to descend onto the world and bring their armies far earlier than the expectations of the rulers. They planned to use the magical energy that was spread around the planet by the rulers to turn the entirety of Earth into one large trap so that they could devour the rulers' armies coming to aid humanity in one fell swoop. For a sovereign who possesses incredible power to cross over into this world, they need a host body who is able to handle their power. But because the Shadow Monarch and Monarch of Destruction possess powers too great, they could not find humans who are suitable to be their hosts. At that time, one of the most capable mages working under a king came to the Shadow King with a proposal that they were willing to find him a suitable human. That mage, called the Architect, asserted that they would only give assistance, but only for an imperishable body in return. Unfortunately, no living thing could become a vessel to contain death. The Architect, with the system he had designed, searched high and low for one talented in sensing magic power, one with prodigal physical power, with superiority, one with great mentality. The Architect searched for a human whose strength would meet the monarch's powers. In the midst of his scavenging, he found someone who bested his system, someone who rewrote the rules of his game and exceeded his expectations. Sung Jin Woo, who was always weak, always closest to death, and yet evading death again and again. He watched Jin, and even in the opposition of the Architect, he picked Jin. Repeating himself once more, the monarch says that he is the record of Jin's struggles, the evidence of his resistance, and the reward of his pain. Jin says that even though he exceeded the Architect's expectations, he must not have been enough to be able to handle the monarch's power, which is why the Architect used object of human skill and human preference to adjust to his strength. By using games and recreation to fuel Jin's amusement, the Architect's system, which used the monarch's power, transformed Jin's body, level by level, to match his own. Jin realizes why the system had an analogous appearance to a game, especially with the player aspects of it. But the monarch betrayed the Architect. Why? Jin asks. The monarch says the ruler's apology and the betrayal of the monarchs had him pondering which side he should stand on. He made a decision and wanted it to be that way. The time he spent with Jin was so blissful. Perhaps he did not want to lose him. He became Jin, and Jin became him. No matter who becomes the owner of this body, it will not be strange, for they are already one. And so, he offers Jin a choice. He could stay in this domain of death and enjoy the eternal dreams he's created for himself. However, if that is not his choice, he will be sent to reality once more and will have to fight his adversaries. Jin Woo brings up the monarch how he said he made his decision, but he did not stand with the leaders, and asks why he escaped to the other world with the monarchs, even though his will to fight the rulers had long dissipated. He responds that it's because that place did not offer a place for him, to which Jin agrees, saying this is not a place he should be. He smiles back as the chairman as Jin asks if this is the last time he will be seeing the monarch, who responds that he will return to rest. But Jin, the Shadow Monarch, will live an imperishable life.